Okay, everybody, welcome. We kind of have a special deal tonight.
We do.
Yeah, this is a special one. Mm-hmm. For more than one reason. So number one, this is coming out of the Jen Hatmaker Book Club podcast ecosystem, which we are sharing with you because we have such a phenomenal author with us. We have Sharon McMahon with us, who wrote The Small and the Mighty, which is just everywhere right now. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. Absolutely everywhere right now. It's at the top of the charts. And we invited my my book club community in. So we were live streaming this with the community. Anyway, you get it too. So hi. And hi.
Hi.
Super, super fun. Now, before we invite Sharon in, and I'll tell you about her too, just in case, I guess you don't have social media. Just know we are centering this conversation around her work, which is government, it's politics, it's history. And so that's sort of where we're going. So in the spirit, I have a question for you.
Yes.
If you could go back in time and have dinner, let's say dinner, with any historical figure of your choosing who in some way influenced American politics, who would it be? Who would you pick?
I mean, I really do have an unknown.
Oh, I'm so excited.
So in 1776, in the winter, the Declaration had been signed, and they were gathered in Philadelphia, but the British were coming.
Okay.
So they moved to Baltimore.
Okay.
And they rented the biggest building in town, the Henry Fight House, who was like 8 generations back the brother of my ancestor. So 3 brothers came over.
I did not see this coming.
The 3 brothers split, went to different places. I'm in the Johannes Fight branch.
Oh my gosh. Spell fight.
Well, it was vote. But changed as soon as they got here to FIT. So the Henry Fight House was the location of
the relocated.
Yes, it was technically a capital for a little bit. It burned in the big Baltimore fire, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Whoa. And that was a risk for him to rent his house. It was like a tavern. It had stables because they hadn't won yet. He was on the Patriot side, so
wow.
I'd love to just go.
Have you always known this?
I have.
You've known this uplink,
but he's not a well-known figure. That's not a well-known location. But I do love the thought that he decided to rent his space out for 2 months, and some huge decisions were made.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Is there anything in that location where the house was?
Yeah, like a bronze plaque.
Okay. Darn it.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
You?
I also am deeply interested in the founders and just the genesis of the country is it's just an endless source of fascination for me. So I could really pick almost probably any given one of the founding fathers, the balls of it, you know? Mm-hmm. It's so clear in hindsight. Oh yeah, you wrote a constitution and you created a democracy, and but at the time it was muddy and murky and absolutely not guaranteed. And there was so much opposition and there was infighting. What a mess it was.
Right.
The fact that America emerged out of it will never, ever cease to amaze me. I think if I had to pick one, I'd love to have a sit down with James Madison for a couple of reasons. Obviously Constitution, obviously Federalist Papers, obviously the Bill of Rights. But he lived the longest out of the founding fathers, so he saw the most.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear his thoughts. He died around 85 or 86 or something like that. He died in, let me look, I've got my notes up in here. He died in 1836. So for a founder to have gotten all the way to the 19th, like that far into the 19th century, a bunch had changed. Like he'd seen it take some roots.
Yeah. He saw an arc.
He saw an arc. He saw some of it. I mean, some of the founders were gone before they knew if this was going to work or not. I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear that story. And of course, they wrote reams about it, so there is a lot to read. But and they're so problematic too. You know, they're complicated. James Madison owned slaves when he died.
That makes it more interesting to me. Like the version we were taught when we were little.
Oh yes, these like heroes.
But like not accessible, not believable, really. Like we're so far removed from.
It's true.
But then when people started saying, actually, they're super complicated men.
Very.
And they still did an incredible thing.
They did. They did an incredible.
Both and.
I mean, this experiment that what are we 250 years into is stunning in its success rate. That our democracy has worked as intended, more or less, all this time, doesn't have a lot of precedence.
Still an experiment.
Clearly. We're still fighting for some of its basic tenets right now.
I'd love to know what they have to say.
The founders?
About now.
Wouldn't you like to hear their thoughts on modern America? Yeah. Especially how we have taken so many of their original bills and ideas and kind of bastardized it. Like we blame the founders a lot. We're like, well, the founders wanted, but sometimes it's not what they wanted.
Right.
And if we laid that over the modern iteration of what we are saying is their fault, they'd be like, no, ma'ams. Yeah. That was not what we wanted. Anyway, yes. Okay, the founders. Let's do one very quick segment and get into Sharon because she is just a fascinating voice right at this exact moment. Right in this, at the like height of the election season. We're almost there. Let's do a little culture shock. Okay, it's just this simple. Let me see if I want to. I'll put it in two parts. How do you typically like to spend election night? And maybe if it's different, will this year be like that or something different this year?
Typically, I like to be home.
Yeah.
Like in bed, under heavy covers, like weighted blanket.
Definitely. Definitely. All the emotional support tools.
Watching Steve in his khakis with his map. And I do really love the map.
I do
but
too.
Also I idle real high.
Oh my God, me too.
And so I will stay up.
Until it's decided.
Which was problematic a few years ago.
Sure was.
And in fact, I did not.
In 2016.
Go to sleep. And so the last time I cut myself off, like, you don't need to stay up all night. It's not going to change anything. Get some sleep. But I like to do it by myself. I have a neighbor who in 2020 wanted to like set up the screen in the backyard and have a projector and all watch together.
Oh.
And so
that only works if everybody is in alignment.
We are.
Okay.
It's my neighborhood.
Okay, that's true. Of course your neighborhood is.
So we did that. But then I want to go home and watch the map by myself in pajamas.
I also like to be alone. Because I'm fixated and I don't ever tear my eyes away. It's hours and hours and hours for me to watch. Some of our friends are moving and the group around them was like, what if we have their going away party on election night? And I was like, I don't think I can. I can't be partying. I will be the worst party guest because I will be back in somebody's bedroom, back in the guest room, trying to watch or feeling one way or another. And I don't think I can pull a party spirit.
No.
It's too sobering. And this year particularly, it's too sobering. I just would be unable to be like, well, it didn't go the way I was hoping, so let's pour one out. Like, I won't feel that way.
No.
I will feel devastated. I will feel, for me, it's not a party night. In 2016, it was Sydney and I, just me and Sydney, and she was in high school. She was a sophomore, and I was positive, and you couldn't have told me different, that we were about to elect our first female president. Mm-hmm. I had a $200 bottle of champagne in the fridge. Me and Sydney were going to drink it. I was going to give it to my sophomore. I'm like, I'm going to drink this bottle of champagne with my kid. Together, we're going to watch history being made. And I sent her to bed sobbing at midnight because it hadn't been called.
Yeah.
And it was like, us staying up in full emotional distress isn't going to be useful. I sent her to bed. And the next day, I did not know what to do with myself. So I cleaned out all my underwear drawer, all my bra drawers, all my socks, and I drank the entire bottle of champagne. So now you know that story. Sitting on the floor of my closet, I might as well get a little drunk and clean out my bras. I didn't know what else to do.
No one did.
I didn't know what to do. So, anyway, okay, having said that, we've got I'm so glad you're listening. I'm so glad you hit download on this, and you're going to be too. And I want to tell you this, however you come to this conversation, by the end of it, you're going to feel hopeful. You're going to feel encouraged. You're going to feel even inspired, dare I say. And that's thanks to kind of Sharon's wonderful perspective. So let me tell you a little bit about Sharon McMahon, one of the most wonderful civic teachers you could ever hope to meet on the internet. So I don't want to steal too much of her thunder because she talks to us about this story, but she was a public school teacher. She was a government and history teacher. And then she turned yarn entrepreneur, and you heard that correctly, and you'll get the deets on that. And then she turned portrait photographer, and all of this was in Minnesota. And then in 2020, her husband had renal failure, so she's caring for him after a kidney transplant. She's raising kids. The businesses it's COVID, and she is like, what am I going to do here? And out of that was only 4 years ago, it's not that long ago, emerged this whole community that she has built around essentially facts, sort of a bipartisan approach to actual politics and government and rules and branches and how does it all work and what's real and what's not real. She is the enemy of disinformation. And of course, as you can imagine, that has drawn in millions of people because we're hungry for that. We're all tired. We're exhausted from the endless partisanship and the fake news and the disinformation and just the vitriol. We're tired. And so she is something of an antidote to that rhetoric. And so it's no wonder that she's just written her first book called The Small and the Mighty, and it is incredibly hopeful. The story of 12 really and truly like American heroes that you've never heard of. Mm-hmm. Throughout the story of America, these small people with a billion odds against them doing the right thing. It's such a great read. And of course, it's told in Sharon's voice. It rocketed up. It hit number 1 on the New York Times list when it first came out last week, and it was on the list again last week, and I assume it's going to stay.
Yes.
And she has this whole community that she calls Governerds, darling. She's got a hit podcast called Here's Where It Gets Interesting. You can listen to that anywhere you listen to podcasts. She's got a newsletter called The Preamble. And if you're not following her on Instagram, it's time. It's time. Basically, her Instagram stories are a constant running history lesson about what's going on that day. what's going on that week, what's real and what's not real, what's true and what's not true. And it just cuts through the crap. So she is smart. She is engaging. She deals in facts, not fiction. And you're going to love her. We do. Our community does. The book club loves her. I chose The Small and the Mighty for the Jen Hatmaker Book Club this month, and we're reading it together. And so we're delighted to welcome you in to this sort of front row seat with the incredible, the delightful Sharon McMahon. Hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm so good. I'm in Chicago. I have a show. I was just telling Jen before we started that I had food that was supposed to be delivered a half an hour ago. I literally just got here. And it hasn't been delivered yet. And so at any moment, there'll be a knock at the door and I'll have to say, hold please. And I'll go get my shrimp cocktail.
That was my question. Shrimp cocktail, a bold choice.
And my burrata panzanella salad.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. And here's the good news. This particular moment is inside the Jen Hatmaker Book Club, the most delightful community you could ever have wanted for a thing where you're like, I'm going to answer that question with a mouthful of romaine lettuce.
That's
right.
right.
You know what I mean?
We're among friends. I feel I wouldn't 100%. Do it. I wouldn't do it for nearly any. I would not let other people watch me eat, except for the Jen Hatmaker Book Club.
That's right, and they will be like, "This is what we do. This is how we are."
Yes, because you're a cook and a cookbook author and an eater, and food is part of your entire Jen brand.
That's right.
Yes.
Any nighttime thing where we're gathering in the 7 p.m. hour, I am assuming people will have chips. Probably a glass of wine. We don't know about it. Ice cream. I don't know. It's all in. Everything's in. So we look forward to the knock on your door. Okay. Let's get into this. Because you've been on a journey. And the journey is, I would say, non-traditional, because at one point you were a yarn influencer. You were a yarn entrepreneur, if you will.
Yes.
The yarnista.
A yarnista.
I mean,
a yarnista. Mm-hmm.
First of all, that's exciting to know that that's a thing. I love the knowledge. And then the next thing you know, you're on stages on a tour. And it's just literally a real, not obvious path from A to B.
No.
Let's discuss. Can you just, if you just had to kind of come up here, like 10,000 feet up and go, here's how this looked for me in my little, to this, to today.
Yeah. Okay. So I started college wanting to be a physician. And I can still in another lifetime, I can see how I would be good at that. You know what I mean? I can see I would have been good at that job. But I had a moment in college where I was sitting in an undergrad class, and I had an experience that I cannot explain. Still don't have an explanation for it. Where it was almost like this knowing descended from the ceiling, like a Star Trek beam of light. Although I didn't see a beam of light, but it was this moment of you are meant to be a teacher. And I was just in that moment, I was absolutely, that is absolutely correct.
Wow.
And there was not, there was not a moment where I was no, really? I don't know about that. I have I'm doing cadaver labs.
Sure.
You know what I mean? In that moment, I was just absolutely, that is correct. And so I left all of my, I finished out the semester and completely changed my major, became a teacher, taught in a variety of, several different states. My very first year as a teacher, they made me teach one section of health. in like an emergency setting, in which you had to show a childbirth movie, Jen.
Oh my God, I remember this moment as a student like it was yesterday.
And teach them
It's
all
dark.
about
It's
the
bleak. It's
STDs.
bleak.
Yes. Like it takes a special teacher to become a health teacher who's like, I'll teach the 16-year-old boys about STDs. I'm cool with it. That was not me.
That wasn't it. That wasn't it for you.
That was not it for
Okay,
me.
sure.
Is that what pushed you into yarn?
Yes, sure. You're like,
No,
give me threads.
Yeah. I did become, most of the time though, I taught government, I taught law, I taught history, and I did that for a long time. I only taught the health class that one time. And we moved around the country for my husband's job. And I decided, I learned how to knit when I was 12. And I started doing some little custom knitting projects like on the side during holiday breaks and during the summer. And I remember very vividly, I had this one client that I was making a custom flower girl sweater for. And it was like for a Thanksgiving wedding, and she wanted this very specific look to the sweater that matched the rest of the decor of the wedding. And we could not find the right yarn anywhere. And she was like, why don't you just try to dye it? And I was like, but I don't want to or know how to do that. And she was like, just try it. She kept urging me to just try it. And so I did, and it actually turned out really well, and it kind of blew up. And I started my yarn business as a side hustle while I was still teaching high school. And my yarn business became very successful, and I started getting up at 2:00 in the morning.
Oh my gosh,
and
Sharon.
I would work from 2 to 6 when I had to get ready to go to school. And I would go teach my classes, and then I would, pick up my kids from daycare, and then like package all my packages and like zoom to the post office to try to get there before it closed. And I did that for a while, and that was very, very challenging.
I'm sure.
To get up.
Because your kids were little-ish?
Yeah, they were like 5 and 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they were little. Yeah. So eventually my yarn business got big enough that I needed to start hiring people and getting a space that wasn't in my basement.
Yeah.
And so I would then get up in the morning and go to my yarn studio and get everything set up for my employees to work on while I was not there during the day, while I was teaching. Oh, and then when I was done teaching, I would go to my yarn studio and like oversee everything that was happening there. I foolishly entered a yarn dyeing contest.
Oh, well, this is another bit of new knowledge that I just got. Uh-huh.
The doorbell has rung.
Oh, this is so exciting.
Hold one moment.
Shrimp
please.
cocktail coming in hot.
Cocktails have arrived. Just a second.
I actually can't wait to see it. Do you have any history with knitting, crocheting, cross-stitching, sewing?
Oh, some cross stitch, but my eyes aren't good enough really. But no, I've tried with the knitting.
You have?
And the crocheting, yes.
Did somebody teach you? Mm-hmm. Who?
Like other moms that do it all the time. You can just do it while they're talking.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that, like Sarah Bessie.
But I don't have that lobe of my brain. It's not communicating with the rest of my brain or my hands.
That could have been really on brand for you as like a big-time homeschool mom.
I know. No,
You know?
I'm like the only one that doesn't.
I bet you are. I'm sorry. I hope that wasn't a source of shame.
No.
No, you don't care. I'm joking.
I just can't.
Just joking. I'm impressed with the skill set. Every time Sarah Bessie comes into my orbit and she holds something up like a whole sweater and then she puts it on her body, I am like, you made that piece of clothing with your hands and just a ball of yarn. It makes no sense to me. I'm fascinated. And I can kind of see how it probably feels.
Yeah.
Like how people talk about when they run and their brain just like gets free to just think thoughts because their body's on autopilot.
I've heard people say this.
I've heard it too. Lord knows I haven't experienced it.
No.
But I want. It's exciting.
My
Let's have a
shrimp.
look. Let's. Oh,
It's a nice shrimp cocktail.
I love shrimp cocktail. For the record, are you like a cocktail sauce with it? Like
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. It's one of those things that like it's hard to screw up in a hotel. You know what I mean? Like if you cannot put cocktail sauce in a dish and bring me some shrimp with it, then there's no hope. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, I really
you can
do.
screw up a lot of things, but it's hard to screw up a shrimp cocktail.
This is really good travel thoughts. Like, what is probably going to be a slam dunk here
Yes.
at the Hyatt?
That's
you
right.
know,
It's,
on any
anyone
given.
can purchase shrimp, and I don't even care if it's homemade shrimp cocktail. Over the counter shrimp cocktail is fine. I mean, our cocktail sauce is fine.
Just dump it out of the jar.
Literally dip it in a cup. That's all I need.
That's right. I really appreciate your good choices you're making. I tend to trust and over identify with the hotel chicken fingers and French fries.
Yep.
Less
those are
good for you.
Yep.
Less
Yep.
good for you, but they generally work.
They generally work. If you have a fryer, they're hard to screw up.
I mean, I know they came out of the freezer. I do.
I don't
I know
care.
they're not cutting up a chicken down
No,
there and
no.
breading it by hand.
It's consistent though. It's
Yeah,
consistent.
that's what it is.
Yes.
Also,
Yes.
if you dunk it in enough honey mustard, well, onward. Like all you just taste is the sauce, and that's fine with me as well. So, okay.
Okay. So back
Okay.
to my very long story to answer your question, and then I'll be done talking about this. I won a contest. I entered a yarn dyeing contest and won like multiple awards. Like I think it was like 4 or 5 awards.
Okay.
And that caused my business to literally blow up. I had over 6,000 orders placed on my website in a 48-hour period for handmade products.
That's pretty
Imagine an Etsy store having 6,000 orders placed in 48 hours, and you have to make all this stuff. And a lot of people were ordering lots of things. It wasn't just like one trinket. I'm like hand making everything.
Oh,
So-
what did you do? That's not possible.
It took me months and months and months and months and months to make it all. And I had to
just
like
dug out of it.
Yes, yes, and I cried through most of it. It was. I very much wanted to just return all of the money and get a job at Target.
Sure.
That's what I very much wanted to do. And in fact, I did apply to a job at Target. And my husband was like, "Excuse me, first of all, you have a job."
You have 2 jobs. Let's be honest.
And I was like, yeah, but now we've gotten kind of used to the income from my side job. Now I can I'll just get rid of that and I'll get this other side job at Target. And he was like, you are banana pants. Go away. No, we're not working at Target. But I did get hired at Target. That's my claim to fame.
Oh,
They got
what
hired
could
at
have
Target.
been,
What could have been?
Just, keep it in your hip pocket. We never know where life's going to take us, and there may come a day you get the red vest. We're not sure.
I wouldn't say never.
No. Okay. Move us forward in the story, because to be honest, especially in today's day and age where it's really celebrated and it's a super exciting idea to find a way to make your fun side passion hobby your main thing, that's a big story that we hear a lot. So you'd actually done that. You had taken your fun side hobby and made it this huge, successful. You could have said, "This is who I am now. I am the yarnista, and I win awards, and I dye.
Award-winning yarnista.
I'm award-winning yarn dyer, and I'm going to build a little yarn empire." And you were on your way to doing it. And so why then did all of this get interrupted, and how did we get closer to where you are right now?
Yeah, I moved my yarn business back to my hometown in Minnesota, and brought some of my employees with me, built out a huge studio, quit my teaching job, moved back to Minnesota. And I did that for a number of years and was very successful at it. I traveled all over the country and taught workshops, and I was good at it. Eventually, one of the workshops that I got asked to teach all the time was how to take pictures of your finished knitting projects. And that, to make a long story short, launched what became a lengthy career in photography. I worked for 9 years as a photographer. And did that until 2020. So
Yeah.
I eventually sold my yarn business and opened a photography studio. Very, very busy doing that. And then everything changed in 2020. And my husband got stage 5 renal failure. And at that time, COVID was so novel and new that there were no treatments for it, no vaccines, nothing like that yet. And people with stage 5 renal failure had a 30% chance of death,
Gosh.
which is like,
Wow.
those are not odds that most people would play with, right? If I said, if you're going to have a 1 in 3 chance of dying if you get in this car, most people would not get in the car, right? So that, just made it especially challenging for us that we really could not risk Chris getting sick from COVID until they figured out some kind of treatment for it. And fortunately they have, and, the odds are much better now than they were initially. But that put a halt on my photography business because, nobody wants their picture taken with masks, and that's very understandable. But I also could not afford, even if my health would have been okay, I could not afford to spread COVID to Chris.
Totally.
And so it
Yeah.
created very
You had to
isolating.
lock down.
Yes. Very, very isolating circumstance. And then in August of 2020, my mom donated a kidney to a stranger in Wisconsin so Chris could get a kidney from a stranger from Texas.
I have goosebumps.
What?
Yep. Yes.
Come on,
A
man.
26-year-old electrician from San Antonio was working on a hospital project and listening to a podcast while he's working, like doing the rewiring, whatever, in the hospital. And the podcast was talking about people who are Good Samaritan organ donors, people who donate either a portion of their liver or donate a kidney into the system, so to speak, the organ matching system, without an intended recipient. Just hoping that the system will match it with somebody who can use it. Most people who donate to an intended recipient or on behalf of an intended recipient, which is understandable. But this guy did not. And as part of a donor chain, like I said, my mom participated as well. And so then, Chris's health was extremely fragile at the end of 2020 because of both the pandemic and also going through an organ transplant is extremely hard on your body, just under the best of circumstances. So we had to relocate to near the transplant center. There wasn't one near us. It's not just like an operation and go home. You have to have daily blood work for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so we had to take our kids and move to a tiny little crappy Airbnb rental, trying to take care of Chris, trying to keep these kids occupied, trying to not get COVID at Target,
Totally.
just trying to
Doing
keep
COVID school. What
Yes,
a time.
yeah. Yes, trying to keep everybody healthy and safe. And so it forced me to have time on my hands that I had never, ever had before. Running, having little kids, running multiple businesses, teaching school and doing all this traveling and whatever. I had never had the opportunity to have no job outside of the home before. So COVID in many ways was a terrible thing that nobody wants to replicate, but it also created a very unique set of circumstances for me that allowed me the on-ramp to do what I'm doing now.
How did that go? How did that work? Because there's one thing about, and then I got online a little bit and did some little things and then I wrote a bestseller and went on a speaking tour in a bunch of theaters that sold out. That is not a guaranteed path.
No.
Uh-huh.
I started noticing that there were a lot of people who were really confidently wrong on the internet in the year of our Lord 2020, Jen.
Oh, the truth of it hurts my feelings. Yeah.
2020, there were a few dudes named Chad who were real confidently wrong. on the internet, saying things like the Electoral College is a university you can graduate from.
For example.
No.
Which is just like, that's not even an opinion, Chad. Okay,
Oh, Chad.
that's
Oh,
that's
buddy.
just false.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started, the very first videos that I made were from this little like rental house near the Mayo Clinic. And Chris, was sleeping like 18 hours a day, and the kids were real busy playing on the Wii and watching cable. You know what I mean? Like not interacting with the world. I could only clean the kitchen so many times. And I decided that instead of arguing with Chad in the comments, that I would just make some little videos explaining how it actually works. And the rest, as they say, is history. They became popular, especially with local news stations, like news stations and radio stations, who were looking for somebody to explain to their viewers and listeners what to expect in the run up to the election. What should we expect after the election? But without delving into this, like, and you should vote for this person. A lot of pundits have a very strong ideological skew, and that's not especially useful to local media who cannot afford to alienate half of their viewing or listening audience. So I started getting booked to be on all of these like radio programs and TV programs around the country. And then the election happened and it was bananas.
Yeah. And then it went.
And then
bonkers.
January 6th happened and that was
right.
bananas.
That's right.
And that's the genesis of how I started doing what I'm
That's
doing.
right.
Man. And now you've built this incredible community with Sharon Says So by being approachable and fact-driven.
Yep.
How have you translated that into your writing process now?
Yeah.
I wrote this book as a love letter to this community. It wasn't because I couldn't think of another hobby. I have no trouble occupying myself, obviously, right? I can find something to busy myself with. I can find another book to read. I can listen to another thing. I can invent a different business. You know what I mean? So this was not born out of a lack of activities or boredom. I wrote the entire thing thinking about who needed to hear this. And I hope it shows, I hope people read it and feel like that was exactly what I needed. And it's not what everybody needs, but it's what some people need. And that's my hope, is that it will land in the right hands and in the right hearts. And so I really wanted my own sort of voice to come through in the book so that you would read it and know it was me. But if you didn't know me, that you would still enjoy it, that you didn't necessarily have to know me in order to enjoy it. But if you did know me, there'd be like those little I see what you did there. There'd be those little Easter eggs if you do know me. So that's it took a while to land on this concept. When publishers started approaching me, they had other ideas for what I could do. And a lot of those were really good ideas. But I just kept coming back to what will serve the people that I care about in this moment in time. And that's how I landed on what I landed on. And I just wanted it to feel like it would mean something to somebody.
Obviously, this is our book club selection for the month.
I know.
So everybody on with us that is live streaming with us has the Small and Mighty in their hot little hands. And I love this structure because you could have, I am imagining that publishers were coming to you saying, why don't you write a book on ethical civic engagement or something more instructional, something very let's give a template to the people. Like this is how
for grown-ups.
Yes, like a prescriptive instructional.
Yes.
I get it. And there's a place for that, of course. But you have chosen for people, because this episode is going out to the big community, you've chosen essentially to tell the story of, is it 12 or 13?
It's like 12 people.
12?
But there's side characters.
Yeah, 12 American people throughout history, most of whom we've never heard of. And they occupied kind of a smaller zip code in the American zeitgeist when it comes to the stories that we've chosen to retell since, decade after decade. And yet all their contributions were so profound, so special. So at many, many, many points was I like, woof, I love her. I love this.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting and a bold and I think the right choice to say, I'm going to tell other people's stories. That's what that's the scaffolding. And I'm going to build on it. And I'm curious. We've both, of course, read every word. Amy listened to it. She listened to you read it.
That's good.
Thank you.
I'm curious, and I think I might know because I think you mentioned this at your event in Austin, but did you have just a real favorite? Okay, I really have two questions. I'm sorry. First of all, how do you pick 12 out of the canon of people who contributed to America? How did you even find some of these are people I've never heard of?
Yeah.
And then out of the 12 that you finally selected, I'm guessing there was a big cutting room floor. Did you have a fave?
I have an affinity for each person in this book for different reasons. It's a little bit like being asked to choose your favorite child, but yet there is a child in your family that you get along with the best. Even if you would never say, you are my favorite, I love you the most, even if that's not actually how you feel, there is always a child in your orbit that, like, your personalities just gel better than other people's personalities. And it doesn't mean that you love them more, but nevertheless, that's a little bit how I feel about this. It's just our viewpoints just gel. And I just feel like I would meet you in real life and we would be friends. That's, how I feel about her. And that person for me is Septima Clark.
That's what I thought.
I do have other people that I'm like, I just love you so much. I love every person in this book for different reasons.
I do too.
But she is just, there's really something about her that is really, really special.
Did you know her already or did you find her?
I did not know her. I had seen her name because it's a unique name.
Yeah.
Right? Septima is a unique name. So I had seen her name in all of my research about the civil rights movement. I had, there's a big list of people, especially women, who never ever get the credit when it comes to the civil rights movement. It's the attorneys, it's the Thurgood Marshalls, it's the Fred Grays, it's the Martin Luther Kings. And of course, what they did is incredibly important. It's not a discounting of their contribution, but even, all the women involved in the civil rights movement will tell you that the men in the civil rights movement were super sexist. They will tell you that straight up. They found Martin Luther King to be sexist.
That's right.
And that's not, again, doesn't diminish what he did. It's just the truth.
It's just a fact.
He was. Yes, he just was. He had a sort of paternalistic view of like men should be in charge and women should make the coffee and type things.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of women with whom without their contributions, this hot air balloon does not get off the ground. Right? There is no leaving the ground without the significant contributions of women. And there were a number of women, especially in the civil rights section, that ended up getting cut that I really would have loved to be able to include. Even people that I didn't get a chance to talk about at the book tour, who just, they were out there doing the next needed thing. Like, okay, we're having a bus boycott. I'm going to drive my white Cadillac around Montgomery. I am going to give people free rides where they need to go. And I'm going to make sure, just to be a little bit extra subversive, I'm going to pull my car immediately in front of the buses, so that all of these bus drivers, they get to see my face and they get to know my car, and they know my name and they know who I am. Like, she wasn't trying to hide what she was doing. There was no like secretly give me a jingle. She was out there, just, what do the people need today? They need to get to work. I'm going to give them a ride. And she eventually has a huge run-in with the police, and it's just, there's a million stories like that of people who just kept doing the next needed thing. Without necessarily this grand design of someday I'm going to go down in the history books. And I love all of those kinds of stories. And Septima is a really fantastic example of that. Because she had such a long career, and because she was an educator, and because she was in many ways the mother of the civil rights movement, she writes her own sort of memoirs. She writes, a couple volumes of her own story. And so that makes her life really, it colorizes her life it takes it from the black and white pictures that you see of her, and it makes her three-dimensional. And hearing her own story in her own words was really impactful for me. And again, she does not shy away from the spotlight. She knows she's going to get fired if she continues doing the right thing, and she does the right thing anyway, and she does get fired. And it is that moment where it seems as though tragedy has struck. And then she takes that suffering, the totality of her life circumstances, and she uses it for the good of other people, right? Not her own self-enrichment, not to put her name on the side of a building, not to have a bunch of marble statues of her own face, but she uses her own circumstances, much like many of us did during COVID. Our life circumstances were such that we were forced to make changes in our own lives. And for some of us, we turned that suffering into something meaningful. And she's just a wonderful example of that. And she later goes on to get elected to the Charleston School Board, the same school board that denies her the opportunity to work in the schools because of her skin color. She later gets elected, and she has an influence on what the Charleston public schools become because she refuses to back down in what she knew was right. Mm-hmm. And I
can't get
I love
enough
her.
of it.
I know. There's one of the things I think about sometimes is whatever people believe about, an afterlife, or some people believe in heaven, and some, there's a variety of ways people think about this topic. But if there is an afterlife, we always think about like our own family that we'll see someday. Like, I'll see my grandma again someday. Oh, sure. Or we think about like my dad has passed away. Yeah. I hope my dad's watching. I hope my dad's proud of me, like whatever it is. I often think about like all of the really great people from history that I would someday get to meet. Like that's an exciting thing for me to think about. Like great. Maybe someday I would get to meet Septima Clark. That is a very exciting, very exciting idea for me.
Oh my gosh, that's so fantastic. Yeah. I love it so much. We've got our community. We're in the middle of reading. It's the middle of the month, so half of us are finished, half are somewhere in the middle. Yeah. But we've got a handful of questions that people have already submitted for you. We're going to get to those. And then we're going to see if we've got any. So everybody watching right now, everybody with us, we're going to throw a question real quick to Sharon that you guys submitted, and then we'll open it up to you. And if you've got a question out there, you're up next. Do you have that first question?
I do. From Amy Carruthers. She says, what are the top 3 things we need to do as a country to make progress in moving democracy forward?
Easy. It's easy breezy. Very, very breezy.
Just top 3.
Top 3, how do we save democracy? Just hit us.
Save it. Well, the first thing that, that comes to mind is that we have to stop viewing this as a zero-sum game in which our enemies must be defeated. The zero-sum game is in which somebody must be destroyed is an on-ramp to dictatorship. That's what that is. There are no thriving democracies that have one political party. And so if the idea is in a two-party system like the United States has, which again, you can make a lot of arguments that that's not the best system to have, but nevertheless, it is what the reality of today, destroying one of the political parties cannot be the goal. We need multiple healthy political parties. And so we have to stop viewing it as from the perspective of, in order for me to win, I have to destroy you. And we have to realize that democracy exists based on consensus building. We have to build consensus. We have to build coalitions that work together to achieve common good. And that is exactly what the civil rights movement did. They took people from disparate backgrounds. Some people were really religious, some people were not, some people were really militant, some people were more accommodationist. Like there were a variety of different viewpoints. But what they could rally around is that we need to get the Voting Rights Act passed. Right? It was not complete agreement in all aspects of our life, not complete agreement in all aspects of our theology, but we need to get this Voting Rights Act passed. And that required consensus building and it required coalition building. So that's the first thing is we have to shift away from this modern perspective of like, y'all have to be destroyed. The second thing is that people need to stop waiting for somebody else to come save us. That there is not somebody on a white horse who's about to ride in with the plan, who is here to be like, I've come up with the plan to save democracy. I think many of us feel like we're in this season of waiting and we're waiting for like the person to make it happen. And some of us pin that on an individual or a person getting elected. But in reality, we're the plan. Right? Democracy comes from a Greek word that means government of the people.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
It does not mean government of the leaders or government of the people with the plan. Anybody who says, I alone can save us, I am your whatever, like I'm the person who, like that person wants to be a dictator. They for sure do. They might not say it with their mouth, but they're saying it with their actions. So it is, we need to realize that we, in fact, are the plan, and that is going to require us to do something. We cannot just do nothing and expect someone else to save us. I guess the third thing I would say is that there are many, many, many ways to be involved in democracy. And I think people think it's like voting and running for office. And those are just two ideas. There's a lot of ideas of ways that you can help protect democracy that fit with your personality, that fit with your way that you operate in the world. If you are an extrovert, there are ways that you can be involved. If you are like, I don't enjoy leaving the house, there are ways that you can be involved. There's not one prescription for how to be involved in democracy. My son is working for a congressional campaign right now, and he's like extrovert times 100. Yeah. He loves it so much. He's in all the parades. He drives the truck that pulls the float in 50 parades all summer. And he loves to be out talking to the people, doing the fundraisers, passing out the shirts and the water bottles and giving the candy. Like that is so fun for him. And that makes me I would sooner die.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm not
doing it. It's not your way.
No. And thank God there's people like him to do that job. I will talk on a stage in front of 3,000 people, but I will not drive your float. I will not go.
I literally understand the difference.
Yes.
I get it.
I'm not going to your parade.
That's right.
I'm not doing that. I'm not casting shade on the parade. I'm not saying the parade's a bad idea. It's just not for me. Right. I will do the things that I'm good at. And everybody can contribute in their own way. And that is not just, okay, that's needed and necessary.
Perfect.
We can't all be parade goers.
What a great answer. This is from Karen Parker. What are your thoughts or predictions about public education? And she says, public preschool teacher from South Carolina and a governored grant recipient. So big fan of you.
Thank you.
Great question.
My predictions about public education. Yeah, well, the predictions are going to be highly dependent on who gets elected, right? And
That's just true.
that the two presidential candidates have very different visions for what public education will look like. But I think it's also important to remember that public education is largely governed by states, and that the federal government has a more limited role in public education than the states do. So who gets elected in your state matters so much. I think we put all of our, put all of our eggs in this, like, I need this president or this president to. When in reality, the things that really affect your daily life are defined at the state and local level. So I do think some states are going to continue to funnel public money into vouchers, into tuition vouchers, they're going to funnel public money into private schools. That's going to continue happening in some states. In other states, that's not going to be the case at all. And that has everything to do with who is elected in those states.
Yeah.
So that's just a trend now that the Supreme Court has sort of opened the door to give public funds to private religious schools. I think that's going to just continue to be a trend in some parts of the country.
Yeah.
Another question from Melissa Meyer. She asks, as we the people approach the moment of voting in this 2024 election, what would you have us remember for ourselves?
I like that as we close it out. That's a good. We're all stressed, Sharon McMahon. We're anxious. This is a lot in the world.
Yes. First of all, you're not alone in feeling that way. I think overwhelmingly, the most common emotion is like a feeling of anxiety. So don't feel like because this is hard, I'm doing it wrong. That is how people throughout history have felt. The people who wrote the ding dang Constitution felt anxiety about it. They worried, and this is in the book, they worried that it wouldn't be good enough. They worried that it wasn't going to hold. They worried that the country would fall to despotism and anarchy. And then they said, we hoped better things. We worried that this might be true, but we hoped better things. And I think it behooves us to remember that our ancestors did not wake up one morning with this blue skies and the birds chirping, feeling this incredible feeling of hope descend upon them, that hope was a choice that they made. We hoped better things despite our external circumstances. Nothing had changed in their environment. Nothing had changed that made them feel an incredible sense of hope. It was a hope that they chose, not a hope that they felt. And so that's one of my wishes for people, is that you will remember that despite your external circumstances, despite perhaps the wrong person winning an election, despite all of the calamity that is on every single news station 24 hours a day, that despite all of that, you can continue to choose to have hope. And that is the fertile soil from which good things grow. We cannot grow good things from a place of hopelessness. If we want things to change, we have to have hope that they can. And our ancestors show us exactly what that looked like. They did not grow weary in doing good. And it doesn't mean that they never felt tired. It doesn't mean they never felt beat down. It doesn't mean that the world was fair to them, because it wasn't. But what it did mean was that they continued to do what they could where they were with the resources available to them. And they rested when necessary, so that they would not grow weary in doing good. And that was available to people of the past who lived in terrible circumstances, who lived in poverty, who lived under Jim Crow laws, whose parents were enslaved, who faced incredible discrimination, who were falsely imprisoned. That was accessible to all of them, and it is accessible to each one of us today. And I want us to remember that we are not beholden to our external circumstances, that we can choose to continue to orient our spirits towards hope. And that is from the place from where positive things can grow.
Good question. Good
On
answer.
that note,
Oh my goodness.
on that mic drop note, thank you for that. That's a good word. It's a good word. Hope is fertile soil. Thank you for saying that. I think we all needed to hear that. We love your book, clearly. We love you. And this feels like such a nourishing, hopeful, inspiring conversation to rally around right at this exact moment. So the timeliness is so perfect. And thank you for this dedicated time to my community. And
Yes, I'm so happy to do it.
we're just so delighted to have you among us. And so we invite you to go to your salad, to your shrimp.
Thank you for putting up with me trying to shove a little shrimp in my mouth.
We'd have it no other way. We're cheering for you. How much longer on the tour? How many more stops?
It is 6 more.
Okay.
6 more stops. I'm over halfway done. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
I got this. It's going
got it.
really well. It's going
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah, we can attest. Okay. Eat your food. Watch your little show. Do you have a hotel show?
No, I need a hotel show though.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. You need something like real light, real the top half of the glass.
exactly.
You know, like
Exactly.
have you seen Loot with
No.
Maya Rudolph? She's
No.
just a comedy queen of mine, so that just
Okay.
rose right to the top.
Where would one find this?
Apple.
Apple.
That one's on Apple.
Okay.
You'll
I
be
need-
delighted.
I
You'll
need
be
that.
delighted. Or
I love
Hacks with Gene Smart.
Oh, Hacks.
Either one of
Yes.
these. Just pick.
Okay.
Just trust us to know
Okay.
that these are a
I'm going
nighttime
to
hotel
just-
show.
Okay, great, perfect. I need that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's it. Off you go. Happy
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Thanks, everybody.
you.
Thanks for
Thanks for
joining us,
that.
everybody.
Thanks.
Yes.
We barely scratched the surface, you guys. There's a billion things we didn't. Amy and I literally left out 15 questions
Yes.
that we wanted to ask her, didn't get to. There's so much else to say about her book that we did not get to. So, what we would love for you to do is find out more about Sharon on your own. And if you go to jenhatmaker.com under the podcast tab, we'll have this whole episode. And what we will do for you is round up all things Sharon, her social handles, her newsletter, her podcast link, a link to her book, all the things, okay? And so that you can find her if this conversation is interesting to you or hopeful to you, or if it feels a little bit like a relief to be able to talk about politics in this way, that's what you get with her. So, on behalf of Amy and I, you guys, we are so glad to have you in our little pod community. You mean the world to us. And thanks for being here. We'll
Thanks
see
for
you next
listening.
week.